Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. It is the notorious, glorious V, the Guerrilla Economist, and we have with us none other, the man of the hour himself, the one and only Agent W. He is here with us, and he is going to break down for us all the latest happenings and goings. You know, folks, I've been getting a lot of emails. They're like, "Hey, where's W? Where's W? W, there's so many things going on, man. So I'm glad that you're here with us. I'm glad you're here. And folks, he's going to go as long as he can because there's no holds barred on this interview. If this interview goes an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, well, folks, you better get ready, grab your coffee, grab your notebook. And I always tell people this: listen, when W's on, grab a notebook, write it down because if it doesn't happen now, just write it down because it will eventually come to pass. W's been on the money on pretty much every single thing, and this is one of the best guys we have, and it is a joy and an honor to have somebody like this on our side breaking it down for us. So without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, W. What's up, buddy?
Hey, guy, how you doing?
It's been a long time, man. It's been a long time. You're a long time friend at this point, and we've known each other for 6 years at least.
Yeah,
God,
so we've talked before that, but certainly, you know, knowing each other at a personal level for at least that long. So
absolutely,
that's been kind of fun. So,
it is.
um, and of course, you've let me have access to your audience during all that time, and I appreciate that a lot. I enjoy visiting with the folks, and I have a particular perspective on things, and so I uh, appreciate being able to share that with folks, and um, uh, we're all part of this. We're all watching what's going on around us and trying to make sense of what's happening, and
Yep.
getting to you know at least give a different viewpoint. Certainly most everything that I share with your listeners is not the stuff you're going to get at the other locations that are out there. And I'm not, they're presenting stuff from a particular perspective. I'm just trying to provide something a little different that gives a different way of looking at some of this stuff as the news progresses. We are in a very, we live in interesting times.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, and I haven't asked you for a while, just as an aside before we get into it. What are you driving right now? You still driving like Grandma's Volvo or something? What is
How
it?
did you know, man? I downgraded. I got rid of the Camaro because my kid's getting bigger. Dude,
Yeah.
before I even jump into the Camaro, okay, I'm gonna have to give it to you Ford guys. Okay, the new Shelby GT 500, bro,
Oh my gosh.
blown away. I am
Yeah.
blown away. Like people are excited about the mid-engine Corvette, and I am too. I'll be honest. I very much am excited for the mid-engine Corvette, but that Shelby, the way it sounds, the way it looks, the my God, man, I was watching it on Jay Leno, and I was checking out the latest previews on YouTube, dude. 760 horsepower, brother.
Well, and you got to remember, it's all about power to weight ratio, and then the
Yep,
other thing, what you can do with it after you've got it, if you
yep,
really feel the need. And
exactly.
I have a good friend that has a couple of the aircraft that came from Carol Shelby's estate, and he's doing just this unbelievable restoration on one of them that is off the charts. It's just beautiful, and he asked me to come on down and let's go for a flight here recently, and I
Yeah.
think they're just about ready to take that sucker out, and it'd be fun to put my Shelby beside the plane and get a few shots. It'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, when you get those shots, man, please send it to me because folks that don't know, W has an original Shelby GT 500, man. Or I'm sorry,
Well,
GT
mine's a
350, right?
350. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, GT
I've
350,
had
red with the
several.
white stripes. My God, woo, my God.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I've had that for a very, very long time. So, it's hard to imagine
Yeah,
at this point. But yeah, very, very cool. I don't get it out much because I'm more of a convertible guy. And at this point, it's getting up there um, to where it's I'd take it out, get a scratch on it or something.
Yeah, no, you can't do that, man. You can't do that. So I got rid of the Camaro, and then when I got rid of the Camaro ZL1, and I have a guy on the chat room saying the Camaro Exorcist has 1,000 horsepower. Yeah, that's not really a factory car. That's a Hennessy tuned package. But yeah, my ZL1 had, I'd had that tuned to it was around a 10-second car, man. I punched out the supercharger, put it from a 1.9 to a 2.3, boarded out. Got the cams done. Cam done. Replaced the cam on it. Header back exhaust. Larger fuel injectors. Changed the pulleys. Put on a tune, and that bad boy was making like 800 at the crank, around 800, high 700s at the wheel. So I just tell people it's like 800 at the wheel, but that was a lot of fun. And then after that, I got the BMW M3, which was just absolutely so well balanced. As an amazing driver's car. Then of course the kiddo outgrew that as well. So the wife's like, "Look, you need to go get a family car." So I got something bigger, meaner, and nastier. I got an M5, and it's a twin turbo V8. I have it tuned to about 725 horsepower. A little over 700 at the wheels at this point. And I am ordering, W, you're going to be proud of me of this one. There's a company called Pure Turbos, and you send out your housing. They will go ahead and they will completely rebuild the turbos and send it back to you. And they'll also send you a tuning package. And I have an amazing BMW Porsche mechanic that I take my car to. Guy's amazing, and he does all the work on my car, on my wife's car. And I'm getting the 1,000 horsepower kit. That's going to be amazing.
Well, I just, I'm more of a supercharger guy. I've had turbo cars. I had a twin turbo in a custom built motor in a Mustang. Had a Cleavor 351 in it, and by the time we got done with the twin turbos and that, it was about 1,000 horsepower, and it was not a street car. It was totally for LSR stuff. But that was it's amazing when those turbos start kicking in. It's just that it's easier on all the parts because it kicks in a little softer. Yep. But I like that instantaneous response if I'm driving around town and all that. Once I started just going to the superchargers,
that is one thing I do miss, man. The supercharger is instantaneous power, brother. Any RPM, and even the twin turbos, the modern turbos, they've gotten better. They're able to eke out, and they're able to get rid of and eliminate as much as possible the turbo lag. But even still, man, it's just nothing like instant on with the supercharger.
Yeah, not 100 a day or put it away.
Yeah, that's why the Shelby's very, very appealing to me, man. Very, very appealing. Yeah. We'll see what happens. If I do it big this year, I'll see if I get a Shelby GT500.
Well,
if I can find one without dealer markup. Yeah. For those that don't know, I was a Chevy guy, and I still am a Chevy guy, and W's a Ford guy, and my daughter, thanks to W, now says Shelby. She's a Ford person. She likes Mustangs. Same thing with my wife.
She is so smart, man. I just love that kid.
Yeah, anyway, they all like Shelby.
I don't want to bore all of your listeners. I do enjoy the car stuff, but I don't want to bore all your listeners. So,
anyway, let's jump into it, brother.
Well, those that have heard me over the years are aware that I do follow the numbers.
Yes, you do.
And it's not because I'm, ordering my life by them or something like that. It's not that at all. So anybody that thinks, I'm, into the woo-woo and, trying to make my next calculation based on, some star alignment or whatever, that is not at all me. However, that said, the people that in large measure are in power around the world, this cult that is in power, positions of power all over the world, in the politics, in the financial stuff, they do go by the numbers. And so it's a religion for them. These are religious practices. And so they coordinate their activities based on this numerical language that they have between themselves, including how they manipulate, for example, the markets and the timing of buy sells and things like that. So while it's presented as being, um, you know, natural rhythms, algorithms, timing, etc., um, tracking essentially the market being the numbers, tracking mass consciousness, if you will, and things like that. Behind the scenes, while there's a component of that that's always present, they're manipulating the movements of the markets based on these number codes and trigger numbers, hinge numbers for things that they want to bring to pass. And so, what they're trying to do is engineer um, artificially uh, using what they believe are natural power numbers, codes, timing, date, which is really has to do with celestial alignments in order to achieve these outcomes that they want. And so we can say, well, I don't believe in that. I don't care about that, whatever. Well, that's fine. They do. You're dealing with a religious order. And if you go to learn any new religion anywhere in the world, they all have their intricacies that the longer you're in, you're blessed to know some new mystery based on the way they perceive the world, both visible and spiritual, if you will. And so, true believers, you get in, you kind of learn the language, you learn how they're communicating, you learn what their trigger things are that they're focused on, and you become, an initiate, you become more knowledgeable, and it becomes smoother and easier for you to function in their group as you become an insider. So, and you can kind of go into any religious order on the planet, and that's the way it is. In this group's, that's really this cult that's running the world at this point in time behind the scenes that we're fighting,
Yeah.
they have a certain numbers, and numbers is their language. It's a universal language that they're working by. And so, that for anybody that's heard me present with you, that probably is a quick synopsis of stuff that I've kind of presented and why I track this stuff that way. That seem right to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because what you're doing, you're basically breaking down the very driving philosophy of these psychos. That's what you're basically doing. You're breaking it down. You're reading their mail, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Well, with that in mind, um, you know, uh, years ago, here on your show, I believe I discussed for you one of the most important events in modern history that occurred. That people talk about the deep state, and I believe that we talked here on your show about the K-129 incident,
Correct.
uh, March 11th of 1968. And for those that aren't aware, K-129 was this Russian sub that was sailed out of the Kamchatka Peninsula facility under very unusual circumstances. It was almost on an emergency basis out of its normal sailing order. People were called in, from their leave and raced back in when they thought they were getting a time off. Being on a sub is a miserable thing, especially these early subs back in the, early mid 60s, because you're packing, you know, uh, 60, 70 people into a very small space
Right.
where, your bunk, all the bunks are hot. meaning that there's always somebody in it, but they're being rotated through uh, the ship so that your bunk's got 3 inches to the guy above you, and second you roll out of your bunk and go back on your shift, a few moments later somebody else is climbing in the bunk and going to sleep. um, it's not a cruise ship, and because they're staying submerged to not be detected, um, much of the time you don't have fresh air. They're foul, they're stinky. uh, you know the one thing you don't want to do is meet the crew when they come back from a sub trip. A
Yeah.
couple
Yeah.
days later you can meet them, not that day. go Don't go home to the wife that night. They don't want to see you. um, and so this sub, guys treasure value their being home, and they were raced back way early and sent out, and then they sent them out with an extra number of people. And we know this from the Russian side, from people on the inside in Russia that have talked about this incident from their perspective. And I have a Russian sub commander. We've spoken several times. He's a wonderful guy that came here many years ago and is knowledgeable on this. And so here, this sub K-129 is emergency rushed back out to sea with an extra 15 people or so, and goes on its patrol. And then it's supposed to report in at a certain point in time. We've arrived at our assigned um, area, and we're now on patrol, and everything's okay. And that date that it was supposed to report in was 3/12 of 1968,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't. And over the next series of days, there was all this drama, increasing concern. Where's the sub? Um, in looking at the records, we had what's called SOSA buoys out there that monitor the sounds in the ocean. And on 3/11, at a very precise time,
311.
we detected this clear marker of an explosion, uh, certain frequencies of sound tell you what's occurred. And so when a hull is crushed, damaged in certain ways because it's metal, it's like hitting a guitar string out of a certain, each string has a different density, and so it makes a different type type of a vibration. And so, this hull, when it was collapsed, makes certain types of sounds that we can identify as being, something just catastrophically occurred. And then they triangulate into a zone and say it happened here. And there's been an effort over the last couple of years to throw everybody off on where that occurred. So there's been a couple of books written about this that were approved by the intelligence agencies, and the data to the authors to do their books. But the location that they cite that this occurred is way, way, way far away from where this actually happened. And, part of the question is, well, who are you fooling? You're not fooling the Russians, because they went out well, let me just add this. So we had this huge ship that was built during the Nixon era called the Glomar Explorer, and we went out to recover this submarine. It was a phenomenal operation, amazing. I mean, classic everything America, to have the skill sets, the industrial capability to build this ship to recover this submarine. Even though it was broken, it was still one piece, but it was broken. And to recover this thing and bring it to the surface, um, you know the equivalent of going to Mars technologically, and to do it secretly and in plain sight. You got all these shipyard workers that have to go there and participate and do stuff, and you got to have a cover story, and you got to maintain it, and then you got to design it to do very unusual things, and yet everybody looking at it doesn't realize what they're looking at. You know, and so this cover that it was a mining ship to pick up magnesium nodules off the ocean floor, and Howard Hughes is funding it. So, you don't have shareholders having to explain to them what you're really doing, etc. So this incredible operation to essentially to the equivalent of a space program, only on the sea to recover this sub. And they pull it off. And there's some people say the sub broke and we only got half of it because that's the cover story. And the reality is that's not true. We got the whole thing. And so, and I don't have time right now to argue about all the details. The ship's bell was in the conning tower. And a few years back, we gave the Russians back their ship's bell. They were complaining and moaning. Has a lot of symbology, significance to families and crew, and
Mhm.
we gave it back to them. It was clear behind the scenes that we had recovered the whole sub, and when we returned the ship's bell, that was proof that yes, we got the whole thing. So and that was contained in the portion of the sub that was claimed to have broken off and fell back down when we were recovering it. So that cover story held long enough to get the job done. And so the reason I mention all of that with the sub, there was in play in Russia at the time this happened, a deep state, if you will, similar to the deep state that President Trump is fighting right now. And so that deep state, these are globalists. These are people that are behind the scenes running countries all around the world. And to think that this problem only exists in the United States or in Europe, it misses the whole thing. You have
Correct. It's a global cult, basically.
It's a families,
Yes.
cult of families that are manipulating behind the scenes to control the world. And so what has occurred is they, part of their religion is this date numbers, celestial alignments, etc., etc. So, for example, they're trying to take over the world. The largest main secret society is this Masonic society. You go into these intelligence agencies, military branches, etc., and they're all Masons. And I know lots of Masons, wonderful people. I have several that are, amongst my closest friends that I communicate with on a very regular basis. But at the very highest levels, my contention would be that just like within any religious order, if you will, you can have a captured operation, just like the United States. A comparison would be 9/11, and people say the government did it. No, the government did not do 9/11. Now, are there people that are in positions in the government of power or authority that were involved in this 9/11 event? Absolutely. Did they use resources, assets that belong to the American people that are part of the American government to pull off their scam? Absolutely. But it wasn't the American government that did 9/11. And was there an attempt to deceive as to exactly who was behind 9/11? Absolutely. Blaming it on some guys in caves in Afghanistan. You know, the people, rah rah, wave the flag. We're going to get those bad guys, etc. And we've been being played all along. The fact of the matter is that 9/11 was a religious event. All of the buildings around the Twin Towers, and the Twin Towers themselves have a certain type of religious significance. All the 42 gods of the Greek Parthenon, this religious order, these Roman gods, were present in these idolic buildings around New York that were there present for this event. You know, the bull down on Wall Street, ISIS, the Statue of Liberty. These buildings have a certain religious significance to their cult, and it's right there in plain sight. And the two buildings themselves, one of the most important aspects of these two buildings, you know, the building has a four-corner foundation. The two buildings are side by side. They're these twin towers are like a passageway. There's a Roman, Egyptian ceremony order called breaking the eights, and the breaking the eight ceremony is this. You've seen this Ankh signal where it's this continuous figure eight. The 8-kun channel is going to use this snake that's continuously biting its tail in this figure eight, or snakes. And so it's that's this infinity sign that is used. Well, the idea is when you pull that infinity sign apart, that point in the middle is infinitesimally small. It's this breakthrough point to the other side. One side is the physical, one side is the spiritual, one side's the time dimension, and the other side's a timeless dimension. And so when you break the 8 into 2 4s, then you can pass through that zone in the middle and go over to the other side and return, and have contact with this spiritual side, get information, etc. You know, Jack Parsons, who was the founder of JPL, that is, Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He and L. Ron Hubbard, who founded Scientology, were working together doing these spells, trying to conjure up spirits who would give them knowledge from the other side on how to do rocketry and other technologies related to, space travel, if you will. And so they were trying to reach extraterrestrial consciousnesses, spirit consciousnesses, that had lived before or lived on the other side, to get advanced knowledge to be able to do technical things that had one time been done before, was their understanding contention. They were talking to, from our perspective, the demon spirits, if you will. And that was their history. That was the founding of JPL. Parsons disappeared at a certain point in time, and it's been said that he blew himself up. There's all sorts of speculation what really transpired there. And he and L. Ron Hubbard were in contact with this OTO people, and which is the Temple Orientis crowd.
Yeah. And isn't OTO connected with the Nexiums and all that other guys?
Well, I don't know that
at some level.
Yeah, there's some connection basis there, because they're all looking for this advanced spiritual knowledge, but I don't think there was a direct connection that I'm aware of precisely. But they are on a similar path, and of course, Nexium, again, using honeypots and spiritual voodoo to control their people. And, supposedly this guy is the smartest guy that ever lived. It's a complete hoax. But you get people that believe
total
it.
joke.
Yeah, and so they get people in positions of power to buy into it, and then they control it. And by the way, Nexium, the thing that you haven't really heard, but it's a big deal, is that this connection to the Mexican government and the Salinas family.
Carlos Slim.
Carlos Slim is there too, not directly in the same way, but they're all connected. And then to the politicians on the West Coast, and that Nexium connection to these mobster families, using the honeypot sex stuff
Now,
to control these groups.
W, you said the Salinas family. You said the politicians on the West Coast. Would a certain like an insectoid, bug-eyed looking congressman be part of that list?
Yeah,
A certain shifty shift.
Yeah, that's there. That's 100% there.
Good.
It's even more so related to ones that you know the names of, but aren't, that are more the mobster side of stuff. And I would actually contend that he's, while he's in a significant position of power and control, etc., he's not the most dangerous of the crowd.
Of course.
Just from a intellect standpoint. He's, dismissible there. There's others, and the connections through the families is even stronger, but again, I don't know if we talked about it last time we were on, but this event that happened on Wilshire Boulevard on February 2nd, it seems so long ago now, when the president was being barred from doing his State of the Union address, etc. We had helicopters that landed on Wilshire Boulevard 9 o'clock.
Correct. In California, if everybody remember that, the Little Birds and the Blackhawks and that Nest team that was deployed, correct?
That's right. And so the what they took out of that building, the Guatemalan Cultural Center building, where this attorney that was involved in Nexium and all that had also offices, they took out in specific types of containment bags that are used for biological, radiological, chemical, W&D type things to contain them during transport. And so it was portrayed as being part of a training exercise. And I just, tell you that with no warning at all, just some guys hitting the streets in MP outfits to stop traffic, you'd never do something like this on a congested city street. We got all sorts of places to go do training exercises out in Timbuktu. That's not what happened here. This was the real deal. And we dodged an amazing bullet. And then that was in Schiff's district. And then at the same time, right there at the port of Long Beach, we got a couple of the largest drug seizures that we've ever gotten, including out of China and stuff out of Mexico. Enough fentanyl to kill everybody in North America a couple of times, type thing. So, and then that plays into what I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. I mean, here you got this port facility, and they, get the stuff that's there, but how long had the stuff been there? It comes in on container ships, and it's not inspected 400 miles off the coast. It's inspected after it gets here before it's released to go into transit across the country or to go to another port somewhere in the world as a transit point. And so you can have all sorts of stuff sitting there that you have no idea what's there because they haven't got to that container yet, even though it's got a bill of lading says X and O. doesn't mean that anybody's actually physically looked at it yet. And you can get an awful lot in a container or two, some of the stuff being pretty nasty. So all of these little secret organizations, still, we have all sorts of operations like this going on all over the world with lots of little clubs. The other one that's getting ready to happen is Sanctum, this other sex club that's based out of California, and a lot of names that people will be shocked to find out that people in the media and Hollywood are part of this. And it's really, it's a Satan club if you get right down to it. And so that's getting ready to break. So coming back to this 311, 311, the reason that that's a big number, 3 times 11, 33, highest level in masonry, 33rd degree Mason. World War One, the license plate on Ferdinand's car, who was assassinated, as Austrian prince, who, our king, that, when he was assassinated in his car, that's widely understood, considered to be the beginning of World War One. There was lots of other events that were leading up to it, but that was the trigger moment that, suddenly we're at war. And it's interesting that this group, Albert Pike, who wrote Morals and Dogma concerning Masons and what they're all about, Albert Pike, this guy who wrote the Bible, the book in its essence that Masons use, says that they worship Lucifer. And there should be no doubt in anyone's mind as to what they're about or who they worship. Well, I know guys, they go to churches. They have Masonic halls in the basement of the church and meetings and their secret handshake, and they're wonderful folks, and it's a club, and it doesn't mean anything. It's how we coordinate to do business behind the scenes, and we mutually self-promote and assist other Masons. Well, there's lots of people. How many people have been involved in companies, and even for example, Nexium or Scientology or something like that? They come in, they have doe eyes, they're all excited, and they think they're in the greatest thing in the world, of whether it be a religious thing or a company or whatever, and then down the road they find out that people at the top were involved in all sorts of graft or misdeeds, criminal activity, and they had no idea, because they didn't ever have done that personally. They just, it was happening in spite of them. Intelligence agencies, how many people in the FBI or CIA or other intelligence agencies actually would agree to some of the things that have been going on over the last couple of years, the way their agencies have been used to manipulate and promote people in government, or involved in this attack on President Trump? If they actually knew what was going on, would they, give their assent to it? And I would contend that the vast majority, if they actually got it, probably wouldn't. Because crimes have occurred. So we look at all of this, and then we go, okay, so there's a component here that's working in the background that's trying to control stuff, and they have certain numbers that are useful to them. So in the case of Ferdinand, on his car, the license plate of the car that he was in when he was assassinated, that license number was 111-118. Now, what's interesting about that is that was, that's considered to be the starting event that started World War One. But if you looked at it at the end of the war, and it was just considered an interesting anomaly, the end of World War One occurred on 11/11 of 1918. So the way you would write that down would be 111118. So the license number on his car is the end date of World War One. And then what was the end?
That's crazy. That's
Well,
amazing.
it is amazing because it's not an accident. World War One ended on the 11th month, the 11th day, at the 11th hour. Why didn't they write the
That is
armistice
correct.
to end at midnight, at dawn, whatever? Who's the poor sucker that how many guys died in the intervening period while the agreement had basically been made to stop the war? Why didn't they just tell everybody stop shooting immediately or whatever? So they come to this agreement, and how many people lost their lives in that little intervening moment to just make it 11 a.m. instead of 6 a.m. or something? But there was a ritual, and they ritually needed that number because World War One, Albert Pike says that it would take 3 world wars to bring about this global new world order, which was their objective. So that was World War One. He said it would take 3, 111. Even the way you write World Wars One and Two, you don't write it with the numerical 2. You do it in that Roman numeral 2. Generally. And so you have the 1, the 2, and the 3, and it's done in these Roman numeral type presentations classically, because there's certain imagery that they want. So the Twin Towers looking like an 11. There's certain imagery that they're trying to project. And the 2 towers having 4 square foundations. So you have this Roman thing, that's it's like a birthing channel is the contention between the buildings for this veil between physical and spiritual realities. And when you break the pillars that separate those, you allow these spirit energies to pass through. It becomes transparent. It's called the breaking the 8 ceremony. And so it's classically seen as an 8 broken into 2 4s, or a 44. So, for example, Obama, the 44th president, the 44 behind the scenes was an absolutely critical number because it was going to break this barrier for these spirit forces to manifest more readily in our country, in our society. And this was this breakthrough moment. Michelle being a Baphomet. And what's a Baphomet? Baphomet is a person that's both male and female. They don't want to be a transgender, get the operation. That's not what the Baphomets do. They're half male, half female. That's their God, the way they see it. And so they have these Baphomet personalities. And so
that's why this whole transgender BS is being pushed down our throats since Dumbo's been in office.
Right, and harder and harder. And having a Baphomet there in this high place in plain sight and then not realize it, not, you're assenting to this, you're part of it, and knowingly or unknowingly. But they have their person in power in a position of, visible. And it's like we've conquered this place, this position, and you haven't done anything about it. You don't even know what you're seeing, hiding in plain sight. So 311 is a very critical date because just like World War One ended at 11-11-11, 311, another 11-11-11, and 33. And it would be my contention that this is all the lead up to World War III. But just like World War I, the key event isn't even the start of the war. The start of the war is arguably soft. For example, the U.S. got into World War I at the sinking of the Lusitania.
Right.
These are Lucifer worshippers. Uh, Albert Pike saying, let there be no doubt that our God is Lucifer, that we worship Lucifer. So World War I starting with the sinking of the Lusitania. Later, because of World War II, this agreement to create the UN. And where's the money come from to buy the land? Well, the land that the UN building is built on, it's a slaughter.
Rockefellers.
Came from Nelson Rockefeller. And then the money to do the building and stuff like that, Lucis Trust. Lucifer Trust.
Lucifer's Trust.
See, you've got, the Luce Trust, Luce's Trust. They changed the name because it was too obvious and people were getting amped up. They want to do this in plain sight. So this has been in the background all along. I would contend that all of the personages and groups to the 90th plus percentile that President Trump is opposing are Rockefeller related here in the U.S. People usually go direct to Rothschild with the banking stuff internationally, but here in the U.S. it's Rockefeller. And it's the Rockefeller wing. There's a Rothschild element to it, and it's huge, but the persons are by bloodline managed, controlled, primarily Rockefeller. And so that's this control arm that's been pushing things here in the U.S. and getting their family members, their bloodline people who their name may not be Rockefeller, but they're Rockefeller. Bill Clinton's a Rockefeller. He's Winthrop Rockefeller's kid. He wasn't a Blythe, never was. That was just cover. He was the bastard child of Winthrop Rockefeller. And
so was Hillary.
I
think she was with Nelson Rockefeller's kid.
Yes, and so the girl that was raised Hillary Clinton, for example, she was on the state champion baseball team in junior high school. And we have, pictures of her and people that knew her, etc. And, she was a great batter and all that sort of thing, fielded and everything else. Hillary Clinton, in her own memoir, talks about the fact that she faked not having good eyesight by having a friend that would lead her around, and she'd hold her friend's elbow because she didn't want to be seen in glasses. She's embarrassed by her glasses, so because she has such bad eyesight. And so that's what the story is. Well, the reality is that this person that we know as Hillary Clinton assumed the identity of the real Hillary Clinton when some event happened between high school and college, and she went out to California and worked for a law firm and did her schooling and like that. And the people that knew the Hillary Clinton growing up, didn't see her again for years. And she's assumed that identity, but it's not the same person. How do you have good enough eyesight to be on the state champion baseball team, and then suddenly you're talking about how you have bottle cap glasses and you're faking it? Well, that's the kind of stuff you can't fake. But anyway, Nelson Rockefeller, of course, died with his hooker, and the old saying, he came and went at the same time.
Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah. So this was one of the girlfriend's kids, and brought her into the mainstream. And of course, that they keep the bloodline pure by marrying in the family, is the power and stuff like that. Chelsea being Webb Hubbell's actual daughter by Hillary from the Rose Law Firm. But so. We have lots of mysteries right there in plain sight. They're all interesting asides, but I come back to this 311. So 311's a date that repeatedly I watch every year, March 11, um, because down through time they've used this date multiple occasions for events because it's a power number. This 33 date, end of World War One, beginning of World War One. I would contend that as a timing marker, World War Three's end keys off of the end beginning dates of World War One. Why? Because what's unique about World War Three compared to any other war? Uh, World War Three, if it plays out the way that we've been programmed for it to happen, this Judgment Day, and there's a new Terminator movie coming out in a few days here. I'll be anxious to see all the symbology in that. This Judgment Day, when the war ends, whatever soft start we have to World War Three with the tit for tat back and forth, World War Three will end literally probably with an hour or a day period of time because of a nuclear exchange. That's the classic understanding. And so this end moment, that's going to be the defining moment of World War III when you have a nuclear exchange, and it's going to be all over in a very short period of time. The dust will settle and we'll see what's left. But it won't go on. We won't be having a nuclear exchanges for days and weeks type of thing. It'll be all over pretty quick. And so this end date for World War One, 11/11/11, is because they do things timed out with exacting numerical precision, star alignments, etc. And that's why, and they coded in advance. That's why 9/11 couldn't have happened on 9/10 or 9/12. The National Emergency Response Code, disaster code, had already been dialed in as being 9/11, so that we were pre-programmed to have this 9/11 in our mind. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists only lists two numbers as being disaster code numbers: 9/11 and 3/11. You can go look it up. Well, that's kind of a big deal. 3/11, yes. What was the date that Fukushima happened? 3/11. And there's an element of people out there that, while it sounds crazy to say that somebody could have done an earthquake that triggered a tsunami that flooded this area of Japan where the nuclear plants that are at, Cohen testified back during the Reagan era about the fact that we needed to have international agreements to stop the use of certain types of weapons, which included weapons to generate earthquakes or trigger volcanoes. Because remember, we had SDI going at the time. We were developing some pretty wild stuff. And what's the contention? Because we do have the capability of triggering earthquakes and volcanoes. So did somebody do something artificial that caused that tsunami that wiped out the coast of Japan there by the Fukushima reactor on 3/11? My contention is they did, and there's other quakes at other locations that are precisely timed and coordinated. One in Chile is a perfect example with the 333 and as the exact time and then the coordinates, etc., showing artificiality. Huge quake in 8. So if that's the case, we're having a war with people with much greater capability than most people realize. Nuclear may be in part yesterday's worst case scenario and not the present.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, we come back to this 3/11. Bulletin of Atomic Scientists says it's 9/11 and 3/11. that's that's kind of interesting. And of course, then we go back to this event that happened off the north coast of Hawaii. This Russian sub that was brought down, and with a rogue team operating it, the normal crew having people on the sub that they didn't normally have, and
Talking
this
about
rogue
K-129. Yeah.
K-129, and taken over by this rogue crew, and then trying to fire a nuclear tipped missile at Pearl Harbor. Now,
Right, and then blaming the Chinese
it was
so that
being
we
done,
go to war with China.
it was being done to make it look like the sub that fired was a Chinese sub,
Correct.
because the Chinese couldn't fire from as great a distance as the Russians could. And then this cover story that's been going around recently where CIA allowed access to their records and books written and all that, and saying, it was 1,500 miles away, out where, this whole thing happened, where it was outside even their range to fire on Pearl Harbor. And that's just not the case. The Russians came and saw the Glomar one was picking up. They knew what the coordinates were where we were working. And the only people they're fooling are really the American people. You're not fooling the Russians. They know
Correct.
they know where we were picking it up, but they didn't know where the sub was when it went down necessarily. But they knew where we were at, when Glomar was working, and they knew where to go look once they knew what it was all about.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nothing there, no sub down there left. That's why they were so adamant and persistent about, getting back parts of the ship, etc., and the ship's bell.
W.
Yeah,
I mean, it would be such a far sketch to say it. And you said it, before last time when you and I met and talked privately. It was in fact K-129 that in the incident of K-129 that it was in fact that was the incident that Nixon used to open up China with. Is that correct?
yes. I mean, it's
Mhm.
actually pretty important to understand what the original intent. Imagine had that missile actually flown correctly and hit Pearl Harbor. And by the way, just so people understand, in those days you didn't have satellites, you didn't have GPS, you didn't have the accuracy that we have today. And so, what that particular type of a sub would do in the early version, that was a Golf One simulation. The Chinese bought two Golf One submarines from Russia when they were still buddies in the early 60s. Then they got where all of a sudden they weren't buddies, and the Chinese have these two submarines. The Russians had graduated to Golf 2, GOLF 2 style submarines, and they had a greater range to fire their missiles from, and they could fire while submerged a few feet and still be hiding out, if you will. But the Golf ones, you had to go to the surface, and then the way you found where you were at on the Earth with some level of precision was you listened for radio broadcasts, and then you triangulated where you were at based on those transmitter signals. And so you didn't have to give your position away because you weren't sending a signal out. You were just receiving and then calculating where exactly where you were on the Earth. And then you would essentially dial in the trajectory that your missile's going to fly to have it hit a specific target based on its starting point. And so the Chinese subs had a range with their missiles, arguably 370 to 390 miles. And that was the maximum range of those early missiles that the Chinese had. It had been modified a bit and able to go a little bit different with work that the Chinese had done, but that was the range that they had when the Russians sold them those subs. The Russian stuff at the time was able to go out there, double that range, and was increasing pretty steadily. And of course, every time you increase the distance just a small amount, the amount of ocean you have to hide in, and the further away you can be when you do it, the harder it is for somebody to detect you. You have more playing ground to work from. And so range is a big deal for, these underwater platforms that for strike capabilities and to hide until you want to use them. So this thing came down, 385 miles north of Honolulu to do this firing and calculate its distance sitting on the surface to then do this launch. The missile was a nuclear tipped missile, but it failed in the propellant stage and blew up in the launch tube and broke the back of the sub. The missile this wasn't a nuclear explosion. It was a failure in the launch tube and it destroyed the sub, but it didn't go nuclear and have a nuclear event. It may have damaged the casing on the missile and had some nuclear residue that got loose, but it wasn't a nuclear explosion. And all of that's important because then, had the missile hit Pearl Harbor, what would the U.S. response have been? They'd have looked at where the missile was launched from, and immediately there would have been this outcry. It had to be China because that's the range that they can shoot from. It wasn't Russia because they'd have shot from farther away. It's a nation state level. It's not a terrorist group that has nuclear capability. It's like saying, who blew up the World Trade Center? Bin Laden. Well, how long did they have to wait to figure that out? Like an hour? It had to be Bin Laden because the answer was already dialed in, had already been prepared. Box cutters and, low-tech technology. And we've been getting scuttlebutt that this is coming. Why? Because the people behind 9/11 had already conditioned you to accept what they were going to tell you was the cause and origins of 9/11. Because while they're on the way to a global new world order, the reality is that you're being drug along and your patriotism is being used against you as a tool by them to get you to go along, to drop your resistance and do their will, their bidding, and drop all of our protections constitutionally to put in place this Nazi-esque homeland security measures to allow them to further take control of your government, your day-to-day life, and put in controls that put you under their subjection and that integrate into their global operation for a global new world caliphate that they control, that's beyond the individual governments of different regions of their global order. And so imagine that 3/11 1968 had occurred the way the plan was intended. What would our world look like today? How different would it be today had that occurred, had what we consider 9/11 now, had that occurred in 1968 and the controls come into play that much earlier? And remember, 1968, you're only 5 years after the coup in which Kennedy was killed. These people being in power, they were rocketing forward to get their will their way in this global new world order. And then when the missile blew up in the launch tube for whatever reason, act of God, these are complex devices and, shit happens.
Right.
They still got their way because they located this with a boat called the Halibut, a ship called the Halibut, this submarine that could work underwater while submerged, kind of a voyage to the bottom of the sea type of a scenario where it could open up a bay and drop a fish that could go down and photograph and do sonar work on the seafloor to try and locate this sub. Even though we knew approximately where it was at, we didn't know exactly. And this thing goes out for a few months and finally locates the wreckage from K-129 on the seafloor. Very hard task. And that was taken via Kissinger and some of these other insiders, Kissinger being a Rockefeller man, to the Chinese. And the drama plays out differently now. Instead of, let me just say it this way, when we had our conflict with Japan in World War II and with Germany, what was the outcome after the war? We then go in to assist in rebuilding those countries, and then they become very close allies. So our relationship with Japan at this point is the closest of any country in the world, economically and industrially. So, and as a people, we are very close with the people of Japan. During the occupation, our guys find beautiful girls over there, marry them, bring them home, and they're part of our country, and the relationship goes on. Our intelligence agencies very closely associated, integrated into the Japanese intelligence agencies, a very close relationship. And so, what if we'd gone to war with China in '68? Tet Offensive has just occurred in Vietnam. We're having these huge conflicts across Asia that are continuing to build and grow. What if we had physically attacked China as a result of this uh, attack on Pearl Harbor, as a second attack on Pearl Harbor? Would we have then occupied China and then done essentially what did happen, built out this industrial base and grown very close with China? That's an argument that could be made from a globalist standpoint. First, we'd conquer it and then we'd occupy it. And as it is, because Pearl Harbor didn't get nuked that day, and imagine how many people in your audience might not even be alive today had that occurred.
Correct.
A very huge event, and certainly more people would have died then than died on 9/11.
It would have radically changed the entire face of the globe as we know it.
Absolutely. It would have been, Pearl Harbor too on steroids, and all the events that would have followed.
And then you and I would have never met, bro, and started the bromance like 6 years ago.
Well, who knows what would happen? It's the world, it's like Terminator. The same cross paths because the scenario, other stuff would have been the same, only different.
Yeah, I think my parents would have immigrated to the UK instead of the US, and I would have had a British accent. W. I was this close to being British, but luckily my parents decided to land in JFK instead of Heathrow.
Oh man, well, I might already be on my space station by then, but well, so with that in mind, we used that information, went to the Chinese and said, look, Russia tried to sneak us into attacking you, and we'd have destroyed you. And so to stop that from ever happening, we need to have closer relations. You need to open up. The saying at the time was only Nixon could go to China. And, so we have the, whole ping pong exchange, and it's, we're opening up and sharing information. George Bush Sr. Is over there as an attache. We didn't actually have an ambassador to China at the time, so he's serving in kind of an ambassadorial role. And then he becomes later director of CIA. Well, what was the basis for that? His time in China. China's opening up, this huge change in the world stage. And what's his history? Well, of course, he was present when Kennedy was killed. The one guy on planet Earth that doesn't know where he was when Kennedy was assassinated. Okay, yeah. And then you see the pictures, and there he is. And no, he wasn't involved in CIA. Oh, well, he might have been a little bit. with the Zapata oil and everything else. The reality is, these people that look like peripheral players, and later on over the course of time, you find out they were at hinge places, and it's an insider play, and it's these bloodlines, these secret handshake groups going back to a lot of the universities. Halper's over at Cambridge. Halper's the unindicted co-conspirator from Iran-Contra, and suddenly here he shows up in this whole operation to infiltrate the Trump campaign and the Trump White House, and is this key player in the whole dossier thing. Piece of shit, traitorous Halper.
Oh, I can't stand Stefan Halper. He disgusts me. Like, if there's one guy I want to choke, it's him.
Well, I mean, and you look at guys like Brennan and
that's the other guy. I think I'd beat Brennan with a baseball bat.
Yeah,
just to the point of death. I wouldn't kill him, just to the point of death.
Yeah, I need to put a leash on him, and we'll chain him.
We'll take turns.
Well, chain him in the
take
yard.
turns. I'll hold him. You whack him.
So
people are asking for live. Yes, this is live. We are live.
Okay. So then you come forward and you say, okay, if we played China, this insider club played China. They got China to this point where we're at now, the biggest enemy money can buy. We transferred technology, including third stage rocketry, etc., over to them. And I would contend that you have to look at the way that China was developed during this period. Who are the insider players with their relationships that built China to where it's at, starting with Bush?
Yeah.
Is China as much an enemy as it is a frenemy in a globalist New World Order thing, just like there was insiders in Russia, deep state people above Khrushchev, who were able to put this sub out there. Khrushchev, he wasn't in charge of sending that sub out to go nuke Pearl Harbor.
Correct.
That was people behind the scenes above him that pulled that off. These globalists that were trying to create a scenario. The same way with 9/11. The people involved in 9/11 that were in positions of authority and power in our government, the average guys would never have been part of that. But it's this secret handshake club that believes that we have to be herded to do their will to create this new world order. They're managing us like a farmer manages the herd, and so we're just along for the ride to do whatever they've decided that they're going to do. And so with that in mind, this 3/11 date wasn't just arbitrarily picked. They get power by using certain dates. It's a hidden fingerprint of who they are, who's behind it. The 3/11 being a 33, 1968. They like mirroring numbers to go backwards and forwards. They're ultimately Satanists. You've heard of, backward writing and upside down stuff and all that. So what's 68 backwards?
86.
So what were they going to do to Pearl Harbor?
They're going to 86 it. Sink it.
There you go. So they have lots of little symbology that they like on the numbers again. Coming forward now to today, this moment in history. Years ago, I had a associate that asked me to come see something that was going on. He was head of security for a company, a person that everybody in the audience would know instantly. And he had invited me to an event, and kind of a black tie event at this facility. And I get there, and at a certain point, he calls over a couple of his junior security people and somebody from one of the other affiliated companies. Says, "Hey, I wanted to show you guys something and get your opinion." And so we go into the bowels of the facility, and look at some technology. And then we get to a certain point in this, and he's aware of stuff that I've done, talked about privately related to this event in 311 of 68 with K129. Um, and we get to a certain point in the presentation, and he points over to the screen and gives me a nudge and is pointing out they're monitoring potential threats and threats from a business side, personal threats to individuals, situations they're monitoring, and we're looking at the dashboard. The contention being, how would we lay out this dashboard better so that you can read it more readily? And having the gauges in the place by criticality that you can most readily see while keeping your eyes on the road, if you will, from a racing side. And so, getting my opinion about that, in reality, that wasn't the full reason why he wanted me there. He wanted me to see that in one category, on one particular screen, when he nudged me, they were monitoring certain dates, some of them yet years in advance. And I was kind of surprised at that. It was something I hadn't anticipated or thought about at all until that moment in time. And he's showing me, that they're also monitoring dates, not just people and places, other competitors, if you will, and friends. And it was pretty surprising. And I'm kind of thinking about processing what he's showing, and then the dates were laid out. I had mentioned something to him previously on something else, and he knew it, but just hadn't thought about it that way. And it was part of the reason for this thing, that the way in Europe they look at calendar dates. If I say 311, well, that's the way we would say it here in the United States, March 11th. We'd start with the month and then the day of the month. In Europe, they start with the day of the month and then the month. So a 311 here would be an 11-3 in Europe. And so he had the screen laid out where you can flip between a European view and a US view. And so, I wasn't really thinking about it at the time, but he was also aware that I had talked about this 311 thing in 68 and the 11-3, and he's showing it to me. And then I realized that he's looking at 11-3, but it's not just the European version, it's in the American version. And I was thinking about that, and of course it's mirrored and like that, and realizing that they're looking at this specific date moving forward, but they're looking at it both ways. Well, that's the way these Satanists, these cultists, oftentimes like to do stuff, is reverse numbers. So just like I watch 311 every year, I watch 11-3. And because, for example, the Madrid bombings, biggest bombing in Europe after the Flight 103 Pan Am flight was brought down. 311 has been a big number after 68. It's something that comes up every year. They like to do stuff on the numbers. 11-3 is, this November 3 date is also a big thing. Lots of years go by, nothing happens. It's not every single time, but sometimes there's alignments, etc. They want to send a message, they want to own it a certain way. You got to kind of pay attention to it. And so this year, even years ago, I've been concerned about this particular 11-3 that's coming up in a few days, because on the numbers, it's a date that if they want to send a message, do something, whatever, it's a key date. And then you look at the symbology in movies, in other places where they like to pre-tell you what they're doing. So, for example, 9/11 in the Bart Simpson stuff, a bunch of insiders there. There's a quite a bit of symbology in the Simpsons that is pretty amazing. That is what we would call predictive programming for the 9/11 event, letting you know it was coming in advance. One of the most famous being Bart wants to go take a trip to New York and
Yeah, the
finds,
program guide that had like
yeah,
9/11 on there.
well, it's the ticket on the bus to get there
Yep.
is $9, and then the towers are right beside it, and they look like an 11, but it's not an 11. It's just the towers. It's like the rock group years ago that uh, had Jerry Garcia had the ties and everything, and you looked at them and there's nice designs, and then all of a sudden you'd realize it's skulls, it's you know. Body parts, it's other things, and so you look at it at one level, it's just pretty colors, and another level, oh my gosh, look at what I'm wearing. It's like that. Well, these for the Bart Simpson one, it was a coupon for $9 to go to New York. Well, if you take coupon and then you break it down, it's the only word in the bottom part of the ad that's legible. The rest of it's just small writing. It's a cutout coupon or whatever. Well, coup, COUP, on 9/11. And so it's part of the way these people think, this religion thinks, is that if they tell you what they're going to do and you don't do anything about it, then you're giving your assent to what they're about to do. You're agreeing with it, you're cooperating with it. And so they tell you in these coded ways what they're about to do. And if you don't say anything, you don't do anything, you don't recognize it, that's your problem. And the bad karma is on you. So, because it's a very karma thing, you've agreed to it. There's sins of commission and sins of omission. If you go along with it naively, well, you're cattle going to the slaughter. You're agreeing, to be, herded and grazed and slaughtered. And that's the way they view it. It doesn't mean that that's the way I think or the way that I think anybody in your audience should think. You just have to understand how these people think. They they think they're more than human. Um, they're Cainites. They believe their ancestors fell to earth and that they're children of Cain, these Nephilim, these giants, other things. And so they're more than human. We're just mere humans, children of Adam. And so it's their job to manage us, to hurt us. So then you come up to 311 or the inverse 11:3. Is there symbology? Is there imagery? Is there preconditioning programming stuff being put out, advertising, in conversations, to essentially tell you what they're about to do in plain sight and take care of the karma thing as far as they're concerned? Um,
W, you there? Hello? W, you there? I think he dropped off. Having some technical issues here, folks. Weird. Hold on. Hold on, guys. We're figuring things out. Well, I don't know what happened, folks. I don't know if they took him off the air or whatnot. I'm trying to reach him on the phone, and he is not coming in whatsoever. Just give me about 2 minutes as I try to raise him. Hold on. Yeah, I'm having a difficult time trying to raise him. Hold on, guys. I'm still working on it. All right, folks. W is coming back in. Just give him a few seconds. He will be back in any minute now. His phone died. Nobody got him. So we're good. So he's going to be coming back in any second. A lot of information, a lot of data covered. So hold on. He's coming. So brace yourself. Hold on. All right, folks, just sit tight. W's going to be coming in. If you guys need to go get some water, go get some coffee, go get a notebook, go get whatever you want. Go get it. We're in a period of intermission right now. So if you guys want to get your snacks or whatnot, I mean, speaking of snacks, we got delicious CBD edibles, folks. CBD edibles. Go there, mycbdedibles.com. Get all your deliciousness, whether it's coffee, whether it's some yummy treats. Go there, mycbdedibles.com. And this is not a paid sponsor at all, but I am right now eating Bubba's Hot Nuts, baby. Pain is good. Bubba's Hot Nuts. It's one of my favorite spicy habanero infused peanuts, and I love it. So check it out. It's made by Juan Specialty Foods, and that's in Kansas City. Juan Specialty Foods, Bubba's Hot Nuts, baby. It's got this kid screaming on the cover, so it's pretty awesome. So check it out. Yeah, I know. But that's what the missus always says. You gotta stop saying Bubba's Hot Nuts. I'm like, I need to go to the store and get some Bubba's Hot Nuts. Got some Bubba's Hot Nuts in my mouth. It's delicious. It's on fire. It just sounds weird. All right, he's back. W, you there?
Yeah.
I was talking about Bubba's Hot Nuts, man.
Yeah. they need to take somebody needs to go back to the zoo here.
Yeah. I mean, I usually eat bananas, but it is what it is.
I remember being at one of the zoos, and they had brought out a burlap sack, and they'd taken some other toy out of the area for the orangutans. And so, they bring different things in to keep them entertained and give them something to do. And so the burlap sack was the entertainment of the day. And you just couldn't believe all the fun they had with that burlap sack, hanging out of the tree, hanging in it, putting it over their heads, everything else. And, just as simple as could be. And, so I think they took a tire out and put the burlap sack in, and it's just like, well, okay. But anyway, but just to get back in the flow there, so these people have dates that they look at. This 11/3 is one that I've been monitoring for a long time. Is this one different than other ones? I think so. Um, so am I Chicken Little? Am I the sky is falling? Is it the end of the world? No, let me just say in advance um, that I believe that we have dodged a bullet here, and that the you know the administration watches these numbers too. They are very on all these dates and threats. This is not something that they're unaware of. We got to get a hold of the White House and tell them to watch something. The reality is, look at what just happened in the last few days. Al-Baghdadi, this ISIS terrorist leader,
Hmm.
they got him. And why is that especially important? You and I have communicated behind the scenes about this over the last few days, and of course, really over the last many years. ISIS, which I discussed with you years and years ago, literally the first days that there's all this drama and excitement about ISIS capturing all of the arms out of our storage depots in Iraq, and taking them to go do war in Syria. And I was telling you at the time, it's complete bullshit. We created them. We were giving them these arms. We're arming them, allowing them to be armed to go provide this front in Syria, because that was part of this Arab Spring, to which really was about reshaping the Mideast for Western interests, to control the oil supply going into Europe, and to further exercise hegemony against Russia, to close off their access to Europe, to sell oil there, to make the money on it. It's about who's controlling the flow of oil for the next 50 or 100 years to Europe as a customer who gets the wealth from that. And so ISIS was really always a Western creation. I think what the president said in his talk on Sunday, the most important aspect of what he presented when he talked to the country Sunday to announce that this terrorist leader that was really a central focal point of his administration thus far, al-Baghdadi, that they had gotten him. But what was the most important aspect of what was said in that speech to me? The president, near the end, says that they got documentation, records, paperwork concerning the origins, plans, and current plans and future plans that were in play. So, from the origin standpoint, ISIS was a creation of these deep state players.
Yeah.
CIA, MI6, Mossad people all working together in this reshape the Mideast plan. So Baghdadi was really a figurehead in many ways, being managed by other people in the background to achieve their purposes, their ends. Stuff that you and I talked about, many years ago, going back to Benghazi, behind the scenes, um, about what was really in play here, uh, what the real objectives were. And so ISIS was this deep state creation. Even the name ISIS, why pick that name? This is a name that goes to this Osiris cult, this um, Roman Egyptian cult that's really running the world. Uh, this Druidic cult that's currently running the world. You look at Washington, D.C., V. Washington, D.C. is one big ritual altar to this cult or religion. The
W there? W, come in.
central object in the
You said you cut off for like
sorry, I
3
had a
seconds.
caller.
So
I
you said
had
the
to
central
shut
the
shut
central
it down.
object,
Is the Washington Monument.
right?
Well, that's the Osiris phallic symbol for this religion. Osiris having been chopped up by his brother, and because he was so evil, killed and chopped up, and then his sister, consort, wife, goes out, finds all the pieces. The one piece she can't find is his penis. So she fashions one out of stone and then has sex with the corpse and then conceives a child uh, that then goes and becomes the new leader of the cult, if you will, Horus. So what's the phallic symbol, this stone, this Washington Monument? So you put a nice name on it, a former president, and call it that. But in reality, everybody behind the scenes knows that it's your Osiris symbology. And all the streets, the layout of Washington, D.C., having a cultic meaning, numbers, relationships, orientations to this cult mentality, the Oval Office being having sexual innuendo and its relationship to the phallic symbol in the middle of the Washington, D.C. is built around.
Yeah.
So these people have certain ways they look at the world, operate, think, etc. And ISIS, this group, is really the same players putting their thumbprint, putting their, right in plain sight. This is who we are. This is the cult. But it's supposedly a caliphate, terrorist organization. Well, it's related to these people that are running our own intelligence agencies that are these globalists working in the background. And you're supposed to ignore that fact, even though it's right in plain sight, put right in your face. And if you do ignore it, then the karma's on you because they told you who they were. So when the president says that they got documentation about the origins of ISIS, and essentially, remember Wiener's laptop, the insurance policy, and it's some videos that made police officers go out and puke in the parking lot at the press conference. They were so upset, and a couple people had to die.
Yeah.
Knew what was on that laptop, the insurance policy. Al-Baghdadi had some documentation, some paperwork that he thought was an insurance policy down the road if he ever, got cornered, got caught. And so he's got the paperwork. Well,
Oh,
the
wow.
president says that after Baghdadi blew himself up, and by the way, we didn't blow him up. He's the one that took his 2 kids down the corridor into the dead end cave and then blew up his suicide vest. We wanted him to surrender. We didn't kill him. And then, and by the way, there's an interesting part of that because it's was said initially that 3 kids, and 11 people, 3 kids, 11 alive and the 3 dead. Was actually 2, but it would be 3 with al-Baghdadi. But drawing attention to that number, the contention is that knowing their present plans and future plans, getting that. What would those plans have been? Was he going to try and do something that was the next 9/11? In reality, was the next 9/11 being planned, and he would be getting credit for it. But if he's a creation of these deep state players, these globalists, the real question is, what did these globalists have in mind for us? And just like that group that got that sub out of Russia, brought it down north of Hawaii and was going to take out Pearl Harbor, was that the Russians or people above them using them as a tool? This same repeating pattern of these globalists getting us into world wars, conflicts, managing us to do their bidding to control the world. So, and the imagery with their cohorts in Hollywood and other places, 9/11, one of the most interesting 9/11 things that's out there, Terminator. Uh, in the Terminator movie, the first one there, the kids racing down the flood drainage runoff area there in LA on his motorcycle. And the Terminator's got a hold of a semi tractor that's racing down the thing, following him, trying to chase him down and kill him.
Right.
And comes up to a overpass, a roadway overpass over the floodway channel. And you don't catch it. It's there. It's in bold writing. If you slow it down and freeze frame it, look at it, there it is. Right on the channel, it says, caution, 9-foot 11-inch clearance. And that's the kind of imagery they use. They'll have 9/11. There's people that have done extensive stuff showing where there's 9/11 on a clock, there's 9/11 on a birth date, over and over and over. So do we have something similar with the 11/3 and with similar types of symbology? Yes, and there's people that have done great work. If you go look and see some of it, Willie out of Germany has done some. There's a guy up in Seattle that's done quite a bit. There's a number of people that have been looking at this state and symbologies that's out there in movies and advertising, etc. That's concerning. But I'll tell you one thing that made me very concerned. We also know that just like on 9/11, there was a drill taking place. Actually, part of the drill was simulating airliners being used as missiles to target American cities, buildings. And it was a NATO exercise. And that exercise is exactly what was happening. And the exercise happened to be happening at the same time that the actual attack occurred. You remember that, V?
Yeah, I remember that very vividly. Yes.
I still got you, I hope.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear, man. Could you hear me? Hello?
I'll assume that everybody's still there.
Yes.
With that in mind, we have a FEMA drill occurring in Seattle on 11/2. And the imagery and the information, the date stuff for this 11/3 is related to, a football game in Seattle. So with that in mind, are we looking at some kind of a 9/11 type event that was planned for Seattle? I believe that we've just dodged the bullet. I think the president is getting al-Baghdadi has thwarted their plans, and there's been telegraphed information that shows that. But I think that something was planned for Seattle. I think we've neutralized it. But, I'm still a bit concerned. Have I got you or not there?
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear, man.
There?
I'm here. I'm here. I'm gonna call you.
Okay, I'm gonna assume everybody's still there when we lost V. So uh, uh, so now let's look at what other things are there that are indicators that may uh, indicate something that was planned, uh, potentially could still be planned for Seattle. Um, this breaking the eight ceremony that occurred on 9/11 with the buildings that I talk about, this breaking the eight Egyptian ceremony that's been going on for a long time, uh, related to breaking the veil to the spiritual side, the demon forces, to give them access to the world. Well, uh, 11/3 of 2019, it's a Sunday. It's the 44th Sunday of the year. 44 is a breaking the eight number, just like the buildings on 9/11. It's the third day of the calendar week of the 44th calendar week. So it's not the third day of the week, it's the third day from the start date of that calendar month, uh, which starts on a Friday. It's you have this FEMA exercise that's planned there. It's a 33. 9/11, I mentioned this event that happened in 68, 3/11 of 68. 9/11 happened 33 years later. 33 is a big deal in 2001. Um, it's the 307th day of the year. In the symbology in a number of locations in advertising and in TV shows and things like that that are talking, we think, codedly about this event. Uh, we see the number 307 repeatedly, and it's the 307th day of the year. Rather than get bogged down in that, I'd just let your listeners go to some of these other people that have done great videos here on this, and review what they have. Willie out of Germany has done a fantastic job. Um, it's the 44th week of the year, not just the 44th Sunday. It's the 44th week of the year. Um, Another interesting number that's in there, it's the 42nd day of fall. Well, there's 42 gods in the Greek
The Greek
Parthenon
pantheon.
symbology, etc. They have 42 gods in their Saturn religion, and so 42, kind of like having all the buildings and symbology in New York with representing their gods. 42 is a big number inside the cult. So anytime I see a 42, I kind of slow down, pay a little closer attention. If I only saw one thing here or there, it'd be a different matter. There's other dates that would work, that would be options for the cult. But when you see them all converging on a single day, you got to slow down a little bit and pay a little closer attention. Um, uh, Another interesting thing in the symbology, and these things are coded in, anticipated decades and decades in advance. Uh, the planning for World War I arguably had been going on for 20, 30 years. Albert Pike wrote his Morals and Dogma calling for 3 world wars to bring about this global new world order. He wrote that in the mid 1800s. And then his practitioners, the people around him, he just put it to paper. It had been discussed long before he put it to paper. Um, and so, how long had the planning been in place for World War One and the follow-up World War Two, and what's in store from their perspective with a World War Three to come? Because they haven't stopped. Their plan is still the same. That's still the objective, to have this catastrophic global nuclear exchange destruction, and out of the chaos, order, a new world order, because they have plowed the field and replanted their way with their players. culling the population down on the planet to 1/6 of what it is today. So one of the movies that would relate to this date and this event is a movie called Black Sunday. Bruce Stern was in it. It was a very popular movie when it came out in '67, I believe it was. And so we look at the gematria of the name of the movie, Black Sunday, and it's about a terrorist group that wants to blow up a football stadium. I think it was the Orange Bowl, and kill all the people there because Arab terrorists are trying to make a statement, or Palestinians or somebody, to the world that they're being abused, so they're going to do the abuse back to the whole world. And so this movie is about killing everybody in the stadium from a blimp. And it's actually a very good movie. Well done, especially for the era. When you look at the gematria of Black Sunday, what is the number? It's 113. Well, and you can go gematria calculator and punch it in, you'll see that I'm right. 113, what's that? How do you also read that? 11-3. And it's a football game, and to be blown up. So these people that are seeing this 11-3 and seeing it tied to a football game are not, completely out in left field. And then this imagery that we're seeing that a number of people have cataloged related to the city of Seattle and a football game on 11-3 and a terrorist event are not, completely coming in from outer space. There's, there's stuff that they're basing it on that has legs. And, but again, if we don't give our assent to it, if we don't agree to it, if we don't allow that they get to do that, and we just blithely go along, we should be able to, potentially stop that. And my contention would be that the administration is very aware of this threat, and in fact, getting al-Baghdadi, played into that, and that we're very much so on this, and that's not going to happen. The administration needs the stability in the economy and in the country to continue forward. The bad guys, prosecutions are coming. They're days away. And they would, anything that would take the country off target, off the path to stop what's coming, they would do anything to stay in power, stay in control. Would welcome a terrorist event, something to slow down what's happening. And my contention would be that the administration is very aware of these threats and has stepped in, neutralized them. They're not going to come off the way they had planned or wanted. But, the FEMA drill is still going to happen on Saturday. We've seen events where there were FEMA drills in advance and then, or simultaneous, and then suddenly, next thing you know, there's the real thing. So we're not dropping our guard, we're paying attention, and it's not wrong to talk about these things, even though it's a little bit disturbing, unsettling, disruptive. I think you still have to have those conversations, and we're adult enough to do that and recognize that there's some real stuff out here, there's real threats, and there's a real group that's trying to, with fear, redirect the country in a direction that suits their purposes. So that's most everything that I was really wanting to say there. I think, if people go and take a look at, you can dial in 11-3, and I think you'll find on YouTube quite a few videos. Some great people have done some interesting research. It's valid research. It's uh, you know, get the brain cells moving a little bit. Doesn't mean that I agree with everything that's out there or think that they've got everything, but they're asking questions, showing what they're finding, and we get more eyes on it, more minds around this stuff, and the likelihood that we're going to um, uh, not have an event goes up radically, and especially because you know, things like capturing al-Baghdadi or neutralizing him, capturing those documents stops this deep state from being able to proceed
W, can you hear
the
me?
way they wanted or intended. So, you there, V? I guess not. So I've got the rest of the audience with me.
W, can you hear me? I don't think you can hear me, W, but I'm here. Oh,
You know,
I'm
I guess
gonna
there's
call you on
other
your phone.
questions V had asked me about some things that all right, so I guess you can hear me, but you can't hear us both together. So, um, looking anything else that we needed to discuss or talk about, I think there's lots of interesting things happening in the world that we do need to pay attention to. However, this is the one that I was the most concerned about was, at least getting this conversation about 11/3 out there, giving it some context with other events that have happened. Um, I'm not, you know, worried about some horrendous event. I actually have people that are going to be at that football game uh, and that are not, concerned about it. And I won't be, but if I had an invitation to go, I'd probably take it. I wouldn't be sweating it because I believe we have got this handled. But I do think we have to look, and even forensically, what was planned. Who are these people, and neutralizing them. If we seized documents, information about current plans and future plans, um, and there was any of these same deep state players, they're still a threat to us. They still are looking at other options. There's other dates, even here in November, that are concerning. Uh, where they would try to do some kind of an operation to take us off target in this moving forward to prosecutions. The thing that stands out is that we, it's very clear. Everybody understands Clapper and Brennan and all the players that we're in a prosecution stage now. That there's for criminal activities. And those criminal activities, in some cases, aren't going to just go through the judicial system uh, in the classic sense. They're actually treasonous. And they didn't spend, $1 billion upgrading Gitmo for nothing. And that's what these people are really afraid of, that they're going to Gitmo and they're never, ever seeing green earth again in this world. Um, they are going away forever. And that's what is really scaring them, because this whole situation has matured, come full circle, and the administration is successfully uh, gaining control of the machine back from them. Does it mean we're out of danger? It's a globalist operation. That we get control of our country back and of our politics, our military, our policing, and these terrorist events that were planned for us, that we get control of that here doesn't mean that we have it over the whole world. These people are still out there. So this is going to be Rome wasn't built in a day. This monster wasn't created overnight. So we won't get it back under control overnight. This is a process, and we have to stay, on it, uh, vigilant, including prosecutions, to stop it from ever happening again. And that's what is happening, about to happen, and God willing, you know, and we all should be praying about this. I don't say that lightly. Um, prayer changes things. A hinge moment was intended for us, in my opinion, only a few days hence. We're not through that yet. There's lots of options, lots in play. We need to get past that. But the motivation from the bad guy's side is very high to take us off point in proceeding forward with these prosecutions. An event like this could be something that would, in their mind, trigger that. I don't think they're going to get away with it by divine edict. And so then we have to prevent them from planning the next thing by these prosecutions. So I know you can hear me there, V. I know your audience can hear me. I think that's what I had for you. I, probably if we were able to continue talking, we'd be able to exchange a few more thoughts. But I think that was everything that I wanted to say. And I hope that, people will go look at some of these other sites and kind of see some of the videos that are very well done on the 11.3, especially Willie's, even with his German accent, he's pretty enjoyable. And, get their mind around the threats that are really there and the people behind them. And, we'll pray our way through this. And I, for one, am supporting the efforts of the president as he is taking on this deep state to, really save the world. So,
Absolutely.
V, I look forward to talking again soon. And you get a question, of course, I'm always available to you, back channel, and give you my thoughts and input. And there you go. Appreciate a chance to talk to your listeners, and I'll talk again soon.
Thank you, W, so much for being on. And folks, again, thank you all for listening in. And I'm chock full of information. We went a full 2 hours, so if you get a chance, go back and listen from the beginning again. Share this with your friends, people that are in the message boards, people that are in the front line. A lot of great data. The game is afoot. And again, let us, be vigilant, mindful, and prayerful for all the things that are happening. And let us hope and pray that everything works out well, and we get to win this whole entire thing and keep this great republic of ours. With that being said, folks, thank you all so much for listening in. Please subscribe, hit us with a thumbs up. That really helps with the dissemination of this channel and this broadcast. So thank you all for listening in. This is V, the Guerrilla Economist. We're over and out.